Well, hello and welcome to this special edition of Close Up. In with us, we've got a very important gentleman, in fact, a son of the soil, who's been living abroad for a long time. He's a Pandit and he's a professor by profession, but he's here to share with us from the holy text in Hinduism. And of course, we're here talking about the Bhagavad Gita. My honor to speak with Professor and Pandit Jai Misir. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Yeah.
All right, you've got a colorful, what I say, bio. But let's talk about your specific reason for being here in Guyana. Of course, we did say you're a Pandit, and you have been teaching from the Bhagavad Gita for many, many years. But there is a particular and specific purpose why you're here, as it relates to the Bhagavad Gita. Let's talk about it.
Well, I believe that the Bhagavad Gita will help us because I think it's the most powerful book in Hinduism. In fact, in Guyana and even North America, we focus a lot on the Ramayana. But this particular book here, I believe it's simpler in the sense that it tells us about the internal self. And that internal self has been realized by many, many people all over the world, millions of people. That is the reason I believe that they go to the Bhagavad Gita for that specific reason. And so the Ramayana, we read it. However, it seems to me that it ends up with a lot of singing. And so when the devotees leave, then they don't have any spiritual knowledge. While with the Bhagavad Gita, it focuses on oneself. It tells us that our self is a part of that supreme soul. And that is easy to understand. Also, we have God incarnate as Sri Krishna. And there, he is the teacher. And then you have a student, Arjuna, who speaks for all of us. And Arjuna poses questions about life. And in this way, it's simple to follow because you have a teacher and you have a student. And the student poses questions to the teacher. With the Ramayana, you have various characters, a very important book in Hinduism, or Vedas, or Upanishads, or Brahma Sutras. But to teach this to the young ones, or even the Western audience, the Ramayana would be a little more difficult because of the characters. You have various different names there. And if people are not familiar with the text, it will be easy. It will be a little more difficult than with the Bhagavad Gita.
So, would it be fair to say that the Bhagavad Gita is the original text of Hinduism,
No, the original text is the Vedas
the Vedas?
and the Upanishads, which is the philosophical portions of the Vedas. Those words there are words that came from God. They're dynamic, they're powerful, and they were inspired by sages and saints, directly inspired from God. The Bhagavad Gita is a little different in the sense that you have God speaking to all humanity. And he came down on earth to show us how to live correctly. So therefore, this particular book, I will give it a little edge because God is speaking to us. And so those are the books. You have sages or Ramayana, you have the poet Valmiki who wrote it in Sanskrit, and then later Tulsidas in the Awadhi Hindi. Here you have, as I said, you have a teacher and a student. And then the teacher is very authoritative in that the teacher is God.
And so from that, you can learn from the experiences, and there's so many things coming out of the conversation between the teacher and the student.
That's correct. And actually, what is focus, the main focus in this book is spiritual knowledge to realize yourself. And I believe once we have that, then we wouldn't go in other places for other things. And what I'm thinking of, many devotees, they move out of Hinduism, and what they do, they go to, for instance, if they have a problem, they go and seek help maybe from a Pandit. And we have some very brilliant and wise Pandits, but we have some also that are not up to par. And so they would go to these Pandits because they don't have any spiritual development. And that's what I'm saying. You could get that spiritual development from the Bhagavad Gita. But then they would go, if they have tension, domestic problems, whatever the problems, mental, medical problems, they would go to these priests and they would tell them, well, you have gra. And then they continue from there where they charge them. And one thing I can't understand, if these Pandits are so compassionate and sympathetic, why are they charging the people? So, but what I feel, if they have just a little of this spiritual knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita, they will not go anywhere, because what we learn from the Bhagavad Gita is that everything is within you. That self, that consciousness, that Atma is there, and that's divinity. We are potentially divine. We are essentially divine. So if you are a part of God, you don't need to go anywhere. And I'll just give you an example. There is a guy who is a schizophrenic, and he has been going to a Pandit to treat his problem. Well, he has a mental problem, so he needs to go to a doctor, but yet he goes to this Pandit, and he's paying all sort of money. So one day I asked him, I said, does the Pandit have any sort of sickness? And he says, yes. I said, what is it? He says, diabetes. And then I asked him further, where does this Pandit go to get his treatment? And he says, to the doctor. And so I told him, I said, and so what a fool you are to go to him. Why doesn't he go to a Pandit also and get himself cured? So, but I come back to the Bhagavad Gita. So with a little knowledge that from here and understanding one's own internal self, one would not have to go anywhere, because all the possibilities are there.
It lies from within.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, Pandit. You've been teaching not only in Guyana, you come back here every year, but you've been teaching a lot extensively in New York, where you're from, where you're based in New York. Tell us how your work is going as a Pandit over there. Then we'll go to your teaching at the university.
Sure, Mark. In fact, where I'm teaching is at the Schenectady Hindu Temple. We've had that probably about 11, 12 years now. What we have there also is a learning center. And we started it last summer, and it's in full swing now. And what we teach there, we teach music, advanced philosophy, Sanskrit, Hindi, English, and I'm involved in some of those areas. But we have other people, and they're all volunteering their time to teach. The learning center is really helping us, because right now I have about 20, 25 students, young ones, and they are the ones that will be for the future, I think. And I always tell them, and my congregation as well, if you're thinking of a year, plant rice. If you're thinking of 10 years, plant trees. But if you're thinking of 100 years, educate people. And that is what we try to do at the Schenectady Hindu Temple. But many of our youths, in fact, some of them came with me here, and some of them were at the Vishnu Mandir at Eccles, and many of them will be in Borbis also. They came on this trip as well, and some adults as well.
Okay. Your work from your temple in New York, you do travel a lot. You go to Trinidad and other parts of the region teaching Hinduism.
That's correct. In fact, my first international conference was in Calcutta in 1997. And I wanted to show at that conference, of course, it wasn't easy to get in. You have to write proposals and so forth. But anyhow, I was accepted eventually. And my topic was simply, I trace Hinduism in the poet and thinker of America, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And that was my first trip abroad, actually, and that was my first time in India. And Ralph Waldo Emerson was taken by the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, he said, I owe a magnificent day to the Bhagavad Gita. It was the book of books. He said it was an empire open to him. And he continues, and he says, it's not just an ordinary book. but it's a book with consistency as well. And so that was my first trip. And after that, then I went to Trinidad and some other places after I made that I give that talk in India. And then I went to Philadelphia, I think was next. And then I went to Trinidad. And I've been going to Trinidad quite a bit at the Vedant Center there. And I give talks on the Bhagavad Gita.
As a young man coming up, Pandit, did you envisage that you were going to become so attached to Hinduism to the extent where you're a priest and you're a priest for a number of years?
Right. Actually, I was playing a lot of cricket here. I went to Central High School and I played White Cup. I thought I would represent Guyana and then I would play for the West Indies.
Okay.
But you have these dreams. I think at an early age, my father, Pandit Misir, and my mamu, Pandit Ripudaman Prasad, they encouraged me. And at that age, I was thinking of it. My father taught me Hindi and some Sanskrit already at a very early age. But then I thought, I didn't think of it because my father always thought that we should have a profession also. And then we can do this so that we don't go into Panditai work and try to make a living from that. And I thought that was wise. So I continued, but the person that really influenced me is really my mother, because I saw her at an early age. When I was going to temple, she would always have a thali in her hand with some flowers and prasad and so forth. And that made an impression on me. And even when I was in the United States, when I started college there, I was still thinking. In fact, I had gotten a scholarship to go to India to study. But then my father thought that maybe, you can still do both. And I agree with him. And that's what I tell young ones. You can also learn Hinduism, but also you could learn the secular knowledge as well.
Yes.
You see, it goes hand in hand. For Hindus, knowledge is sacred. Secular knowledge as well as spiritual knowledge. But the thing is, the secular knowledge will help you here, profession, make your living. But after that, what? The knowledge that will take you back, and the Bhagavad Gita tells you that, and all our scriptures tell you the same thing. It's spiritual knowledge that will take you back to God. So they can go hand in hand. And I thought when everything, now I see everything unfolded now, and now I realize that what my father did was the correct thing.
Wow, powerful. I'm happy that the influence of your mother and father stayed with you even until now. You're also professor at the Hudson Valley Community College, State University, New York, Albany. And you've been there since 1996. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, 1986, that's correct.
1986, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I started there. Mark, I did not like English. In fact, when I was here, we used to, I don't know if you still have it, I don't believe so, but they had the GC, the General Certificate of Education, through London University. Yeah. And I used to pass other subjects at that level, the ordinary level they call it. But I failed English about 3-4 times. And I never really liked it. But I remember when I started to get some idea about it, my uncle, Pandit Ripudaman Prasad, invited me at the parliament. And I was waiting there outside. And I think there was, I can't remember, but there was some sheet there with a poem by Rabindranath Tagore. And I read the poem because I was waiting for one of my friends to, and we had to go and I think later play some cricket, I believe. But then I read the poem, and the poem says, and I'll just give you a few lines, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. And it goes on like that. But then I thought that was a really good poem, because even in our own little village, we had little quarrels and so forth. And I thought if everyone understood what this poet was saying, I think there would be less conflict and problems in our community. But then I thought at that point, maybe that I'm going to like English a little. And I think I passed it before I left Guyana. And then when I went over there, my father told me, Jai, you should go into accountancy. And he meant well. He thought that it was very demanding and so forth. But once I started doing it, Mark, and I do have a degree in accountancy and business administration and so forth. But I couldn't see myself sitting behind a desk and debit this and credit that. So as I was studying, I also branched off into English, and so I did double majors and I did my graduate work in English. And after about 12 years in management, I decided to teach. And I call on one of my mentor, one of my teacher, who I admire very much. And because actually she advised me to get into teaching. But then I called her and I told her what I was going to do. And then I ended up at Hudson Valley, a part of the state university. And I'm teaching English there
Beautiful.
right now.
But since 1986, since way back then, before 1986, you were into management. You were teaching all your life. Basically, that's part of your life. Down the road now, you're a Pandit, still teaching. That's still very much part of your lifestyle.
And that's correct. Because the English, and I see where it's helping now, because there are a lot of Guyanese, for instance, we have a Schenectady High School, and a lot of them, they're in colleges. But I'm able to help them with their English and interviewing and all these other things that I have some experience in because I was a manager. So I actually hired people. And even now also I'm on the screening committee. So I'm able to help them. And a lot of them grammatically I'm able to help them because even high school, the teaching there in America is a little different in that sometimes they would go straight to an essay, but then the student may have problems with sentence fragments or run-on sentences. So I'm able to assist them.
And structure.
Right, exactly. And able to help them to speak and to write. And that's one of the things that we focus on in our learning center as well. Not only the teaching of these various subjects, but also writing well and speaking well. Because I feel no matter what area you're in, I believe that once you can speak and you can construct something properly in writing, I believe that that's important.
You have a future. Pandit, you've been traveling back and forth every year. Any plans to come home and settle probably eventually in years to come when you would have probably closed your door at your job in Albany?
Yeah, at one point I was thinking of coming, Mark, but it's not practical because I got married over there and I have children who were born there. But the other thing, I see what I'm doing there as well in the Western world regarding teaching Hinduism. Here you have Hindus and so forth, but what I want to do is to let the Westerners know and understand Hinduism. I sit on a board at the College of St. Rose. It's called an interfaith board where you have 3 Muslims, 3 Hindus, 3 Christians, and like that. But I feel even on that board, that little board here, they do not understand Hinduism. And they think, for instance, that Hindus worship idols and many things that I'm able to help them with, but also to give some talks as well. So I think that I will be valuable abroad because there are a lot of, not only Guyanese, but Indians, and not only Indians also, but other races from Guyana as well as the West Indies. Some of them belong to our temples and a lot of Americans also. And that is the reason why I think that the Bhagavad Gita will be very helpful because even, great writers, I mentioned Emerson, but not only Emerson, Walt Whitman, Henry David Thoreau. You go to England, you have Thomas Carlyle there, great writer. You go to Germany, you have Hermann Hesse there, novelist. So you have a lot of writers who have also influenced other writers all over the world. But what the point I'm making is that they are all sticking with the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, T.S. Eliot, a 20th century American poet, he studied at Harvard and he got hold of the Bhagavad Gita. And then he said, after he finished, he said that there are only 2 religious books in the world. One is the Divine Comedy by Alighieri Dante, but the other book is the Bhagavad Gita. And he said that there is only one book with a philosophy, and that is the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, T.S. Eliot went on at Harvard and actually studied Sanskrit to really understand the Bhagavad Gita.
In doing your research and your work as a Pandit, have you been able to read other books, for example, other religious books, other religious texts, and what have you come up with?
Yes, I've read other texts. In fact, right in Guyana here, I did religious studies at GC. So I did some of that, and I also read the Quran as well. So I did a lot of work in that area. But what I find, Mark, that those are, especially when you move at a higher level, you're getting the same thing there. For instance, you take love, for instance. You go into one faith there, the Christian faith. You read there, love thy neighbor as thyself, weak in mind, sick in delusion, they're still your brothers. And then you go to the Bhagavad Gita or any other Hindu scriptures, the Vedas or the Brahma Sutras, and you'll find that there, love thy neighbor. The only difference there with the Hindu, they give you a reason why you should love your neighbor. You love your neighbor because your neighbor is yourself. So yes, you have a lot of similarities, and I find that. In fact, in Corinthians, you have there, I think Jesus said to Peter, I will make you a temple of my God, and you will go no more out. Or I and my Father are one, and you will find that in fact the Hindu concept is to go back to that God. That here in the Western world, they call that energy. We call that Brahman or God or Krishna or Ram, any name that you want to use. But we feel that you have to go back to that. And that particular line from Corinthians, to me, like it has something to do with that particular concept of Hinduism, where the individual soul will merge with the supreme soul, and there is no coming and going.
So you do see a link between the religious texts from one to another, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran.
That is correct. Yes.
All right. Now, you're here for a series of meetings, and you've already started a few of them.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the meetings and what you plan to achieve in those meetings.
Well, I did some talks, and they call it a yagya, and I did 3 sessions, and at the Eccles Vishnu Mandir there, and one was on the nature of what you call steady wisdom. That was one of the topic there. And another topic was the significance of inner strength. And the other one was the importance of knowledge. But I approached those topics from the Bhagavad Gita. And I'll be going to Borbis at the Vishnu Mandir there, in fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, at 3 o'clock, and that is in Bushlat, in the quarantine. Then the next day, that's Wednesday at 6 p.m., Wim Waterside Mandir, and that also is in quarantine. And then number 64 Village on the quarantine at Vena's residence there, and that would be at 6 o'clock.
Okay, in closing, what is it you are hoping to achieve at the end of it for the people that come and listen to you as you speak?
I'm hoping that we can spread this message of the Bhagavad Gita throughout Guyana, because I find that many are leaving Hinduism and don't have a clue. I mean, their parents and foreparents, they have been Hindus, and they turned to Christianity. So I don't think they have any knowledge of Hinduism, because I think if they have just an inkling of the Bhagavad Gita, just a little, I believe that they wouldn't make those, they wouldn't go in that direction. But if they go, they will have studied all along. So, but I think that we are not doing a good job as Pandits, and we need to educate ourselves. We can't have incompetent Pandits there. We have Pandits who are reading the scripture through the English language. You cannot pronounce Sanskrit or Hindi in that way. So these things have to stop, and we have to get competent Pandits. And we need the people also to educate themselves. And in that way, we will be able to at least help them spiritually.
Okay. All right. You made mention that they're leaving Hinduism, they're going into Christianity. Is Christianity the only faith that they're going to, or are there other faiths as well?
Predominantly, I think it's Christianity, but in other faiths as well,
and
Islam.
you're
somewhat.
thinking because they're not using the traditional
They're not-
language, there is a pull factor too.
Well, not only the language, Mark, but I don't think we're explaining our concept of Hinduism properly to these young ones, especially. And what they see a lot of stories and literal stories. And you have to keep in mind, our scriptures, they are all poetry. And poetry, you cannot take it at a literal level. You have to take it at a higher level. So that is the problem. So if we do not have competent people to explain our scriptures, then that's a problem.
And so you're here to work with Pandits as well, so they'll better understand how it is they need to teach the food, or I say spiritual text coming out of the Bhagavad Gita.
Exactly. And I think my Uncle Pandit Ripudaman Prasad at his Kendra there. He's doing some teachings with Pandits there. And I'm hoping that all that will help. But we do need competent Pandits because they are also misleading. When you're not educated, Mark, you also lead people in different directions rather than the scriptures. And then also if you're doing it as a business, then that's another problem. You just think about that. So you're not interested in teaching.
Okay. Well, Pandit Jai Misir, it was really great talking with you. And again, welcome back home. And we trust that you were able to achieve your objective as you speak to Hindu brothers and sisters throughout the length and breadth of Ghana.
Thank you so much, Mark, to have me on.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, a special edition of Close Up, speaking here with Pandit Jai Misir. Until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.